Welcome to this very special broadcast that we bring to you from Washington, D.C. and looking at the American elections and the way forward between India and United States in their relations for coming together for strategic as well as business economic ties. I'm joined by Dr. Sebastian Gorka, former advisor to President Trump and Deputy Assistant to the President of the United States. Thank you very much for joining me. And the biggest takeaway from what we've seen of the campaign so far are the two attempts at the life of former President Donald Trump. How do you look at these developments in the campaign going forward, and the fact that security becoming such a key issue in this campaign? How do you think America is looking at this?
Well, sadly, those are the only two famous instances. There have been at least 5 attempts against the president's life. There was one on a rally where an individual managed to get up onto the stage and try to attack President Trump. The sad thing is we have 2 big political parties in America. One of them, the Democrats, who are in charge right now, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden. They have normalized violence. They have called my former boss for 8 years now a threat to democracy. They've compared him to Hitler, to Mussolini. It was inevitable that a Democrat would try and kill President Trump. Now we've seen a second attempt of a sniper trying to murder him, and they are continuing to use this rhetoric. Even after the second attack at the golf course, the White House press secretary, Karine Jean-Pierre, refused to denounce the violence, the rhetoric of people like Joe Biden, Kamala Harris, calling President Trump a threat to democracy.
But what do you think this is coming out of? Is it just about the fact that, there has been a polarized rhetoric, or do you see more to it than just what meets the eye?
Oh, it's far more than just rhetoric. The thing about my former boss is, despite having been president for 4 years, he is still an outsider. He's not a politician. He's a billionaire, a self-made man, a successful individual whose name is known around the world, the most famous person on the planet. As such, as a self-made man, he isn't owned by anyone. He's not owned by the unions. He's not owned by the pharmaceutical companies, by the defense industry. As such, he remains an existential threat to the corrupt lobbying interests in this city of Washington, D.C. They want to keep on doing what they do without accountability. That's why they put my former White House colleagues, Stephen Bannon and Peter Navarro, in prison on trumped-up charges. The fact is, President Trump wants to make America great again, and there are a lot of interests in this city that wish to stop him at any cost.
But the Democrats also hit back, saying President Trump, following the results of the last election and what he stood for, the kind of situation that unfolded at the Capitol, something that America definitely doesn't want to see or repeat it again. How do you see this very intense face-off going forward? Is it just one side to blame, or does the shoe pinch on both sides?
Well, the fact is, I was there on January the 6th. I was in the front row outside the White House as the president gave his speech. And it's very important to remember what he actually said. President Trump said, "We will now march peacefully and patriotically to the Congress to have our voices heard." That is the right of every American, and we had some very suspicious things occur with the election of 2020. Since then, there is no excuse for what they have done to President Trump. He is facing 730 years in prison on trumped-up fake charges. God bless the Supreme Court that has dismissed many of them, but they want my former boss in prison. He is the leader of the opposition. The shoe, as you say, is only pinching on one side, and it is the Democrat Party, which is normalizing rhetoric and the use of the judiciary against the leader of the opposition.
So let me ask you also the question that there has been one debate between President Trump and Kamala Harris, who's now in the presidential race, and many people say that she won it hands down, and it shows up in the polls where, her popularity has gone up about 3%. How do you see this? Do you see this as an advantage for Kamala Harris? Do you see this as, Donald Trump falling behind in the race and going forward? The way the polls are looking at things, do you think that impacts chances in the results?
Well, the fact is, after the poll, President Trump's polling figures went up 5 points. So he's currently in the lead if you look at the reliable pollsters like Rasmussen, like Trafalgar. And the fact is, the most important question, the most important demographic are the independents. With the independents, it was President Trump who won. Reuters famously did a focus group with 10 undecided voters, 6 of whom after the debate said they're voting for President Trump. Why? Because she had no policies. She was asked about how you're going to fix the disastrous economy that you and Joe Biden has created. And she talked about growing up in a middle-class family. It's word salads. It's meaningless. There are no policies. And the strange thing is, if she could fix the situation, why hasn't she done so for the last 4 years as vice president? There's no there. There's just meaningless word salads. President Trump, when he was in office, created the largest economy the world had ever seen. We crushed ISIS. We sealed the border. We put China back in their box. The fact is, people remember when petrol was $1.80, not $4. They remember when inflation was 1.7%. That is the Trump era, and that's what people want back.
But people do believe that he's going to put up tariffs. There are going to be policies on immigrants,
yes.
And at least some of the people back home in India would want to look at this very closely as how is India and U.S. relations going to move forward once again if President Donald Trump does enter White House back again?
Well, it's very easy to answer what the relations will be between India and America if, God willing, we do our part and President Trump is re-elected. We had amazing relations with India. I believe, if I'm correct, the largest audience for President Trump ever was when he spoke in India. What does that tell you? And we want tariffs against people who are doing things which are illegal and unfair, like China. We will have very good relations with India as we had in the past. And when it comes to immigration, look, I am an immigrant. I came to this country legally. I waited in line. I took the test. I paid my money. I made my oath to the U.S. Constitution. That's as it should be. But this regime under Kamala Harris, who is the border czarina, have let 20 million illegals into the country in 3.5 years. That's insanity. There's no nation in the world that can survive with tens of millions of illegals. We want immigrants, but we want them to come here properly, like I did, like Melania Trump did. That's every nation's right to demand that.
How do you see going forward? Is President Trump going to be open for debate number 2 with Kamala Harris? Has he left the door ajar there for considering once again?
Well, everything is possible with President Trump, but the fact is it's not going to happen. Think of this. President Trump and J.D. Vance, his vice president, have given 54 interviews since he was chosen as the vice president. Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, her vice president, are running from the media. The only media they ever give interviews to are friendly media, and it is edited beforehand. The recent interview on CNN, it was 27 minutes missing. Where are those 27 minutes, and why did it have to be pre-recorded? President Trump does this all the time live. What is Kamala Harris hiding from? That's what America would like to know.
Well, what about social media platforms? In the past, there has been a huge controversy over Russians trying to manipulate elections in America. This time around, some of the tweets on X by Elon Musk have created quite a furor. How do you respond to some of these developments?
Well, I believe in the First Amendment. It is the thing that separates us from so many other countries, including the Second Amendment. That's why we are free in America for the time being. God bless Elon Musk, who again is an immigrant to America like I am, a legal immigrant. And the fact is, social media is essential. But the fact that they are targeting conservatives before he bought Twitter and turned it into X is an absolute outrage. We now know this is unclassified. The Biden administration was working with the Department of Homeland Security and the FBI to target conservative accounts on Facebook and Twitter. As for the Russians, look, let's be honest. The Russians have been trying to subvert free elections ever since 1917 and the October Revolution. That's nothing new. The problem isn't the Russians, though, because we have official statistics that not one vote was distorted by Russian covert actions in the last election. But we do know that Hillary Clinton paid $12 million for a smear dossier from a former MI6 agent that was based on Russian propaganda. That dossier, the Steele dossier, was used to obtain illegal FISA surveillance warrants on members of the Trump campaign, eventually President Trump and myself. That is the real problem.
So how do you see these elections over the next few weeks, given the fact that both sides, and in any election, why should anybody give up? But both sides are not giving up on targeting each other, while the Republicans have said that Donald Trump is being vilified. The other side, the Democrats, say that it is President Trump who's raising the temperature in the words that he chooses to speak in his campaign. How do you see this going forward? And American people, how would they react to it?
Well, look, the idea of moral equivalency between the two parties is absolutely fallacious. There is no leading Republican, not my former boss, not a member of Congress, who has said the following things. One of the chief January 6 investigators, Dan Goldman, congressman from New York, a Democrat, has said, quote, on television, Donald Trump needs to be eliminated. Biden himself has sat in front of one of the most important buildings in America, Independence Hall, bathed in red light, flanked by Marines in dress uniforms, and he's called half of America MAGA extremists and a threat to our democracy. Nancy Pelosi has used similar language. We've had Chuck Schumer, the most senior Democrat in the Senate, stand on the steps of the Supreme Court, threaten President Trump's Supreme Court nominees, Justices Gorsuch and Kavanaugh, with the following phrase, quote, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, you have reaped the whirlwind and you will pay the price. There's no Republican who's threatening Democrat members of the Supreme Court. The Democrats are a radical party that must be stopped at the ballot box.
Let me quote, President Trump recently posted on Truth Social that the rhetoric, lies and numerous lawsuits have taken politics in the U.S. to new levels of hatred, abuse and distrust. He claimed that the communist left rhetoric is causing violence with bullets flying and the situation is likely to worsen. I want to ask you, is the situation likely to worsen? Is that your assessment of the moment?
The Democrats will stop at nothing. Let's be clear what happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, when President Trump was shot in the head by a Democrat donor. Let's be clear what happened in West Palm Beach very recently. A man who donated 19 times to the Democrat Party got within 400 yards of President Trump with a rifle and wanted to kill him. That's not going to stop unless the Democrats fully reject the language that they've been using for 8 years of calling the man who got more votes than any other incumbent president in history, Donald Trump, a threat to democracy, a Nazi, and a dictator. If they don't stop that, the threats will increase, and we must pray for the safety of Donald Trump, Melania Trump, and his family.
The Democrats have new hope after President Joe Biden has stepped out of the presidential race and Kamala Harris coming in. Many people now say it's a 50-50 race. Do you think the campaign of Donald Trump has stepped back a little, dropped back a little ever since this change took place?
That is the conventional wisdom, but if you look at the polling figures, especially with working class Americans, they don't like Kamala Harris. Think about the fact that the Teamsters Union, that's the truck drivers, the lorry drivers, have always endorsed a Democrat presidential candidate since 1996. Recently, the Teamsters boss, the union head said, we're not going to endorse any candidate because there's no clear candidate for our members. Why did he do that? Because just the same week, they had polled the lorry drivers of the Teamsters Union. 59% of them want to vote for President Trump. Kamala Harris does not resonate with working class Americans. Let me tell you why. What's the most valuable thing a human being owns? It's their home. When we left the White House, the average monthly mortgage payment for an American was $800. Today, under the Harris-Biden disastrous economy, it is $1,700. The average mortgage payment has more than doubled. If you live in the real world, if you don't live in Washington, D.C. or a big metropolis like Boston or New York, you actually have to pay for the price of the disastrous Harris economy. As a result, I think everyone knows which way the wind is blowing.
Well, the wind here at the moment, which way is it blowing? Let's ask the wind. But coming to India's ties with the United States. For India, the centerpiece is the United States and its approach to China.
Yes.
And India and its position with Russia, which it would expect United States to understand. How do you see the different strategies that President Donald Trump would follow to what if Kamala Harris were to be the president, she would follow?
Well, Kamala Harris would be a disaster. I mean, could you imagine Xi Jinping or Vladimir Putin taking this woman seriously? Look what Putin just said. He trolled her live on television. He said, I like Kamala because her giggle makes me feel so happy. He's making fun of her because she's a joke. I mean, any question you ask her of substance...
Wouldn't that be gender insensitive?
Well, that's a politically correct statement. I don't believe in political correctness. Either you're qualified or you're not. I don't care what your sexual organs are. I grew up under Margaret Thatcher in the UK, one of the greatest leaders in the world. We have Indira Gandhi, we have Golda Meir. It's not about what gender you are. It's, are you a serious person who represents the interests of your nation? That's what Donald Trump did. And I was always asked when I was in the White House, so what's President Trump's foreign policy? How should we understand his stance to the world? I'd just come from teaching the Marine Corps. I'd been based at Quantico for 2.5 years, and I borrowed a phrase from the Devil Dogs. I said, it's very easy. When President Trump is the commander-in-chief, no better friend, no worse enemy. If you are our friend, like India, the world's greatest democracy, you'll be very happy with President Trump as your ally in Washington, D.C. If you're a bad person, if you're a dictator, if you're a murderer like Putin or Xi Jinping, you're not going to have a good time with President Trump in office. Look at one metric, just one metric alone, wherever you sit, whether you're in New Delhi, whether you're in London, in Paris. When we were in the White House for 4 years, there were no new wars in the world. That's stunning. No new wars, because the bad guys were afraid of President Trump and his team. We leave office, what happens? Instantly, we have this disastrous surrender of America in Afghanistan. Just absolutely catastrophic. 13 of our servicemen murdered in Kabul airport by ISIS suicide bombers. And then what happens? Putin looks at his watch, tells his guys, oh, okay, we've got a senile old man and an incapable woman in the White House. Let's roll our tanks into Ukraine. And they invaded. After that comes the slaughter of innocent Jews on October the 7th, the greatest loss of Jewish life since the end of the Holocaust. Why is this happening? Because when America shows weakness, bad people do bad things. When we were in office, no new wars. That's the metric all Indians understand, and everybody who wants to be our friend understands as well.
Well, what would you in the end say about the chemistry between Prime Minister Modi, Donald Trump, and the fact that they're likely, Donald Trump says they're meeting in the coming week, yes, whereas the Indians are still not confirming that meeting. Do you think that's happening?
Everybody who is wise in the world is having meetings with my former boss right now. That's what I said about knowing which way the wind is blowing. If you want a safe world, if you want good trade relations with America, the greatest economy, you are going to Mar-a-Lago or New York in the next few weeks. That is very wise. And as to the chemistry, look at the videos from when they meet. Look at the president's trip to India. It's simpatico, it's a connection. This is what you see between what? Men or women who love their country. If you love India and you love America, you have a connection. And that's what Modi and President Trump have. That's the connection. Patriots.
Well, on that note, thank you very much, Sebastian Gorka. Thank you for joining me. And all eyes, not just in America, but even back home in India, are going to be on this election and the proposed meeting between Prime Minister Modi and President Donald Trump. Thank you very much for joining me right here under the sun with the background of the White House, the Lincoln Memorial, the Washington Memorial, and the corridors of power in Washington, D.C.
Thank you kindly. God bless.
Thank you.